improve your ability in aquaculture. Alright, please help me welcome Professor Patrick Sorgeloos.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be invited by the school, by the dean, and meet with people from the Polytechnic, students and teachers here at the university. As some of you might know, I have a long experience with Indonesia. Some of you might be surprised that my first visit to Jepara near Semarang in East Java was in April 1977. So already a long time ago. A lot of things have changed in Indonesia. We have had many students, master students, PhD students. So I hope that maybe today I can motivate some of the students here in the room to consider a topic which is close to our heart, and that's the brine shrimp Artemia. Because there are real potential for your country to get into this business, into this activity, as you will see during my lecture. So I have organized my lecture in, let's say, 3 parts. The first part will be some general knowledge on the biology, the ecology of Artemia. Then the second part will be on the utilization of Artemia in agriculture as a natural food, in the hatcheries of shrimp and fish, the cysts and the biomass, as you also see in the picture here. Then I will focus on a very practical example in Vietnam, because of the many projects that we have set up in the field of Artemia. The most successful one at the socio-economic level. So socio, the salt farmers, and economic, let's say from a business point of view, is Vietnam. So I will briefly show you the history of that production. And then I will finish, well, and the reason that I'm showing this is that so close to this place here in Madura Islands, I visited many years ago. And I'm very much convinced that Madura Island has real potential to work with the local salt farmers and develop the same activity as is so successfully done in Vietnam. And then the last part, very short, will be on international cooperation, on education, the role of the university and the polytechnics in society, how they can cooperate. And then I hope we have time for some discussion. And I'm sorry, my language skills are limited to a few European languages, but not your language. So don't hesitate during the discussion time to use your language for the question. And I understood it can be translated, so that might make it a bit easier to interact. Okay, let's start. So first on the biology of Artemia. And talking about the biology of Artemia, we have to start the story somewhere. We have the adult animals. So brine shrimp Artemia is measuring about 1 centimeter in size. And that brine shrimp has a very unique characteristic. It can produce, eggs. So some people call these brine shrimp eggs. It's not exactly an egg. It is an embryo that has developed up to a late blastula stage. You might remember from classes on embryology. And in that stage of about 4,000 cells, a shell is surrounded around that embryo, because we are not talking anymore about an egg, but an embryo. And very surprising that 4,000 cell embryo can go into a complete arrest of metabolism. In many textbooks you will read Artemia cysts are in a state of dormancy. Dormancy, as you hear from the word, means dormant, means very low metabolism. like some animals in cold winter periods. But in the case of Artemia, now we know that it is not a dormancy, it is a full stop, a complete stop of metabolism. And I will use a word which is very contradictory. This is like a reversible death. I use the word death because there is no more metabolism at all. And I say reversible because this embryo that is stopping all metabolism, 1 year later, 10 years later, 50 years later, you bring it in good conditions, life starts again. So many years ago, that was in the early 70s, I had not, believe it or not, I had not heard the word aquaculture before. So in 1970, I started my MSc and my PhD work in the laboratory of embryology, a professor in the faculty of medicine who was using this animal, Artemia, in cancer research. Oh, now you say, what has this to do with cancer? Well, a lot, because his interest was, if we can understand the mechanism to stop metabolic activity and switch on metabolic activity, maybe we can learn about the mechanism of a cancer that you can be carrying and that only in 10 years or in 20 years might become active. So this was the early 70s. This late professor had really a good idea, but believe it or not, it is only 2 years ago that a colleague in China has discovered the gene that is responsible for switching on and off of this metabolism. And in the meantime, this professor at Airlangga University in China has been able to introduce that gene of Artemia in 3 cancer cell lines, and using the gene of Artemia, at least at the laboratory, they can switch on and off the cancer development in cell lines. Just to tell you a little bit history. So in 1972, I had finished my MSc and I wanted to start my PhD. I got a scholarship to do a postgraduate in the United States, in Duke University Marine Lab. And there, to my big surprise, in the first classes that I attended, there was a professor who was studying the morphological developments of crab. Now you will say, what has this to do with the study? Well, crabs, those of you who are familiar with will know that the zoea stage, the megalopa stage, the crab stage, from a morphological point of view are very, very different. And he was using Artemia as a food for these crab stages. So then all by a sudden a new world opened up for me. Wow, Artemia is not only an important subject in cancer research. Honestly speaking, I became more interested in aquaculture. I came back to Belgium, set up a laboratory, and okay, this is what I will tell you now on this animal. So for the past 40 years, we have been studying with a big group of scientists in Belgium and with many other countries in the world on this, I consider, a very unique animal. So we need to start somewhere. There's a chicken and egg study here. So the powder that you see there, I often call it the magic powder. This is the Artemia cysts. You look under the microscope, so to give you an idea on the size, the diameter of the Artemia cyst is about 250 micrometers. So that means 0.25 millimeters in size. You see that some of the cysts are spherical, nice spherical. Then others, you see, it's like a flat football. Well, when the embryos are dehydrated, the nice spherical structure is crimping, and you have a dry embryo. Again, very big surprise for the specialists in biology and metabolism. A live animal with a water content of 4%, you talk to the specialists in physiology, they will say at 4% you cannot keep proteins, DNA, all these very sensitive molecules in an active state. Exception, branch-brain Artemia. So these embryos, they can stay alive or potentially alive for a long time. You bring these dry cysts in seawater, even in fresh water. First thing that will happen is that the cyst will take up water and it will swell. It will become a fully hydrated sphere. And then inside, we don't have the time to go into much details. Inside, the metabolism is starting. And after a number of hours, the shell breaks open and the embryo, the baby Artemia, is appearing. First, we call this the umbrella because it is like a parachute, and underneath you have that embryo hanging. So we call this the umbrella stage. I will come back to that later. And then a few hours later, about 3 hours later, an enzyme is secreted, the so-called hatching enzyme. And now what you see there can escape and is the free swimming, what we call instar 1 Artemia, the nucleus of Artemia. This nucleus of Artemia is full of yolk, very important because this will be the good nutrition for fish larvae, for crab larvae. And important to know, during these first 8 hours, in that first stage, the Artemia is not eating. The Artemia has not yet a functional digestive tract. The mouth is not open. There is no digestive tract yet. So for the first 6 to 8 hours, the Artemia is swimming around in the water, using energy. Keep that in mind when we will talk about application. And it is only after about 6 to 8 hours that the animal will molt. We are dealing with a crustacean. The crustaceans are growing through consecutive molts, molting stages. And we see that now the Artemia is much more slender. Most of the yolk has been consumed because the animal needs that energy to stay alive and to metabolize. And as we can see in the picture here, not in the mouth region, now the digestive tract is open and functional. So the animal is filtering particles, algae, bacteria, and eating and digesting the food. The animal is molting second time, third time, fourth time, so about 11 times the Artemia will molt before they reach the adult stage. So we see that, look at the digestive tract here, these are the big antennae to filter out the particles. The animal continues to grow, will develop what we call complex eyes, just like many other crustaceans. And what I didn't pay enough attention to is that here on both sides of the digestive tract, a lot of new, what we call thoracopods, a lot of new legs will develop, and suddenly we get an animal that is equipped with a lot of appendages. And we reach, after about 10 days, depending on the temperature and the food, after about 10 days we have a 1 centimeter, so the animal you see here measures about 1 centimeter, has 11 pairs of thoracopods, these legs that now will help the animal to swim in the water, to collect food, to eat. And in the head region, a very peculiar organ here is the antenna of the male, and this antenna can open and close and will be used to grasp the female, to hold the female during the copulation. So here you see this structure. It's a quite impressive grasping organ, and So this is one side, this is the other side, and that can open and close as we will see in the next pictures. This is a female. We immediately see that in the head region there is not that big clasper, whereas in the abdominal side you see the uterus, you see the brood sac where the babies will develop. So this is the stage, the copulation stage, where we see the female, we see the brood sac. This is the male, and the male is now holding the female. The copulation itself, because that swimming in pair is not the copulation itself. The copulation itself is one of the two organs. The male Artemia has two penises, and one at a time is introduced in the brood pouch, in the uterus, to fertilize the eggs. Okay, looking here in a petri dish, this is a female, you recognize with the brood sac. This is a male, this is female and male in riding position. The reproduction is, sad enough, a little bit complicated in Artemia. It's a primitive crustacean, but on the other hand, quite specialized. And so this is the mother Artemia with the different legs. This is the uterus, what we say as the brood sac. Yeah? And on both sides, so there are two ovaria where the eggs, the oocytes, where the eggs are developing. They are not yet in a mature stage. Maybe you can distinguish a little bit the different eggs. But then within 1 to 2 days, the eggs develop into embryos that develop into a live nucleus. So the first way of reproduction is producing live babies. We always think about Artemia producing cysts, but in fact the most natural reproduction mode in Artemia is live babies. It is only in extreme conditions. We will see later the extreme conditions or low oxygen, high salinity, stressful conditions. And when there are stressful conditions, we see that in the brood sac, in the uterus of the mother, we see these brownish colored glands. They are called the shell glands. So this is in fact the organ that will secrete the shell and will surround the embryos. So when we see that the shell glands become active, then we know that the mother Artemia will not produce live babies, but when the eggs in the brood sac are fertilized by the sperm of the male, so the embryological development starts, 2 cells, 4 cells, 8, 16, and so on and so on. But once about 4,000 cells are reached, the so-called gastrula, then, big surprise, the embryo stops further development, is surrounded by the secretion of these shell glands, and then we see a brood sac full, not of live nuclei that are released, but this time full of these cysts. Cysts that are released in the water, and the next production can start again. So every 4 days, the mother Artemia can produce either live or cysts. So it's a very productive animal. So we see it here summarized, what we call the life cycle of Artemia. We have the dry cysts. You can store them a long time. You bring them in seawater and it takes about 24 hours and you have the baby Artemia, the nuclei. Then I say here plus minus 14 days. The record is in Vietnam with 9 days that the animals reach a 1 centimeter adult stage. And as I have just explained, we have 2 ways of reproduction. We have the live reproduction, and you will see that this is let's say, closing the loop, because these live babies will continue to grow, will become adult. So maybe you will already realize when we will talk a little bit later about controlled production, if we can close this loop, we can start with a small inoculum, we can start with maybe a few kilos of cysts here, produce the babies, put them in the salt ponds in Madurai in good conditions, they reproduce and make a bigger and bigger and bigger population, and then at a certain moment, of course, we want to see them producing cysts, we let the salinity go up, we let the oxygen level come down, and they start to produce cysts. Because when they produce cysts, important to realize is that this is not closing the loop anymore. It means you produce cysts, they float, you can harvest them, they are not developing because the conditions are not favorable for production. Or in other words, when you have a big population that is producing cysts, day after day the population, because Artemia become older, they die, there is no new recruitment because that loop is not continued. So keep this in mind when we will talk about how to do pond culture in Madurai Island, we will have to take this into consideration. Okay, this was very short on the biology, now a little bit on the ecology. Where is Artemia? Where do you find Artemia? I'm all the time talking about Madurai Island, but there is no Artemia there. How comes? Okay, I want you to find it out. So when we look at the world map, Artemia is found in many, many different continents. I think you see immediately, oh, what's happening here? No Artemia. And I was mentioning Vietnam. How comes? I want you to find it out in a moment. But indeed, no Artemia in Southeast Asia, Artemia in China, in Siberia, in Kazakhstan, all over Europe, different places in Latin America, North and South, and also in Australia. How comes? Well, here we summarize the ecological characteristics. The common feature of Artemia biotopes is high salinity. Brine shrimp. Brine means concentrated seawater. So Artemia lives where the others cannot survive. And that has all to do with the fact that Artemia is such a good food. It is the best nutritional aquatic product you can think of. So when you put Artemia in the sea, it will be eaten right away. So Artemia in historical times has adapted gradually to higher and higher salinity, and so today it lives where the others cannot survive. Very crucial ecological strategy. So to live, because you can say, how does it come that Artemia can live in high salinity and fish and crab and shrimp cannot? Well, because they have it is the most efficient osmoregulatory system. Because if you live in water with a very high salinity, you have two options. You can be an osmoconformer, if you remember from the classes of physiology. Osmoconformer means that the body tissues will have the same salinity as the salinity in the environment. So there are some copepods, there are some zooplankton organisms that you collect them at 10 parts per thousand or at 40 parts per thousand, and they will have a body salinity of 10 or a body salinity of 40. Not the case in Artemia, and honestly speaking, because this is things we learned only later, we can be very happy and lucky that Artemia is an osmoregulator. Because if Artemia had been an osmoconformer, we could not use it in aquaculture because it would be too salty for the fish, for the shrimp. Artemia, although it lives at high salinity, has a very efficient ionic
pumping system to excrete salts all the time and maintain the body fluids, big surprise, maintain the body fluids at 15 parts per thousand. Same salinity, I could say, as our own blood, as our own tissue. So an osmoregulator. On top of that, it has special, we do not have time to go into all the details, it has special hemoglobins, because when you live at high salinity, the solubility of oxygen is low, so you need to have special pigments to take up enough oxygen. So the lower salinity limit is the salinity where you find predators. Yeah. The rest I will skip. So where is Artemia found? In a lot of salt lakes, and the one that is most known, and as you will see in a moment, is also the biggest commercial source of Artemia, is the Great Salt Lake in Utah in the United States. It's a 6,000 square kilometer lake with one zooplankton organism, brine shrimp Artemia. It's a monoculture of Artemia in that big salt lake. And at certain moments of the year, so it is after the summer, it starts in September, the peak is in October and November, that you see big accumulations. 30, 40 years ago, the people thought, oh, this is like mud. Not realizing that when you look at the microscope, that these are Artemia cysts. So again, an advantage that we have is that the Artemia cysts, that they float. If they would sink, we would have a very big difficulty to harvest. But the fact that they float means that when there is wind, they will be thrown ashore, or as we will see, they will accumulate at the water surface and can be collected from the waters. So very typical when you fly over some of, well, this is the Great Salt Lake, but you can fly over other big salt lakes, and the streaks, because they call these streaks, that you see there, it's not an oil spill. This is large quantities of Artemia cysts. And these quantities can be so enormous that they are sending, so this is picture taken from a plane. You see two floating rafts where they use the oil skimmers to concentrate the cysts. And this way they have huge accumulations of cysts that they are pumping in boats and bring on shore, like you see here. So that Great Salt Lake that we have just seen every year in that period from September to December, they are collecting more than 2,000 tons of Artemia cysts. This is a very impressive production. So it's really an industry with planes that are looking for cysts. Then the picture that you have seen, we look now a close-up of what you see there. So this is all the big bags, because when you are talking about 2,000 tons, you really need to have the proper equipment to collect all the material. We don't have the time to go into many more details, but many sites in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Siberia, you can find huge, look at this here, this is maybe 1,000 tons of cysts that accumulates here at the big salt lake in Kazakhstan, and where it is a lot of manual labor to do the harvesting. All this area here at the border of Kazakhstan and Russia, also in China, and for example here, maybe you heard about the Aral Sea. This was a big, what you see here, was a big freshwater, one of the biggest freshwater lakes in the world. For the cotton industry and other agriculture, they cut off the inflow rivers. The red line is the former shape. And this is in 2005, and the next picture you will be surprised to see what is left of this big Aral Sea. In the meantime, it's no more fresh water, it is brine, and it's full of Artemia. So now they are harvesting Artemia also from the Aral Sea, a form of freshwater sea. Okay, a couple of words on the role that Artemia plays in salt production. I think you know, or I briefly explain you, what is the process of making salt starting from seawater. First thing you should realize is that seawater is not just sodium chloride. Seawater is a mixture of magnesium, calcium, sodium, chlorides, carbonates, sulfates. So this is really a very complex system. And people already hundreds of years ago found out if you want to harvest sodium chloride, because for our health it is important, we need salt, but that salt should not be contaminated with magnesium sulfate, should not be contaminated with calcium carbonate. So if you do a sequential precipitation, this is the concept. So you let seawater go from the sea into first, second, third, fourth, etc. ponds. The water evaporates, and then I suppose you will recall from your classes in chemistry that you have different saturation levels. So the calcium carbonate will be the first one to precipitate. Maybe already here somewhere in this one. You go a little bit further and it is the magnesium that will precipitate. And if you have a good series of interconnected ponds, you will reach at a certain point the saturation of sodium chloride. And people today, and I will explain you that Artemia is playing a very good role in this, you can harvest 99.6% pure sodium chloride. I'm sure Vietnam and Madura, it's 90%. People are very happy that it is 90%, but you could reach 99.6. So in these salt works, how and where is Artemia? Well, initially when you pump in the water and you let the water evaporate, 50, 100, 150, etc. The first ponds, some fish, like here the milkfish or some gobiet fish or even some tilapia, might manage to adjust to 40, 50, maybe even 60. In some tilapia we see that they are still reproducing at 70 or 80 grams per liter. But eventually, and I say 100, it differs from place to place. In some countries like Thailand, 80 parts per thousand, okay, is the upper limit for fish. But in Egypt, for example, they have a very nasty fish that can survive up to 150. But so when the predators are gone, this is the place where Artemia can start to develop. And in the initial ponds, I say initial in terms of salinity, they reproduce with live offspring. So that means when, we will see in a moment, flamingos, birds, or wind will bring in some cysts that are hatching out, the Artemia population is expanding, yeah? And then at a certain moment it becomes too salty for Artemia. Remember, they need a lot of energy at the high salinity. At the high salinity, the oxygen level is decreasing, so the Artemia are stressed. And it's like, I'm simplifying things now, it's like the mother Artemia feels, oh, I will die, this is the end of my life. And what she is doing, she is switching from live babies to cysts, because the cysts can survive, the adults cannot survive. So this is in fact the wonderful adaptation to that environment, and that Artemia at a certain moment is switching from live to cyst production. Okay, we have got the food is mainly the algae as we see here. I will skip a few of these slides. On the red color that you see in the salt ponds, this is also due to the presence of Artemia, and the quality of the salt can be better when you have Artemia in the system. We can discuss it later. Okay, I told you Artemia, how does it get now into the salt lakes, into the salt ponds? Well, there are different methods for dispersion. Wind, okay, we have, as you will see in a moment, we introduced Artemia in Brazil in one place, and in a couple of years, an area of about 1,000 kilometers got colonized. Birds, flamingos, but also other water birds can be carriers of Artemia. So this is the example that I want to give you with Brazil. There is a lot of salt production here in this area, and in the 70s, no Artemia. I tell you, it was more than 1 million hectares of salt ponds, no Artemia. The Brazilian government wanted to know if we could help them, so in April, it's not mentioned here, but in April 1977 or 78, I don't think that was 78, we introduced, believe it or not, 250 grams of Artemia, a handful of Artemia cysts. 6 months later, the first ton of Artemia cysts was harvested. This area was a new area for salt production, and apparently natural dispersion had not yet taken place. So birds who normally could carry Artemia from one place to another, in the case of Brazil, they migrate over the Amazon and not via the coast, not via the desert. That brings me now to Southeast Asia. Anyone who can answer me why in this area no Artemia? A quick answer. Why no Artemia in Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand?
Maybe there is no salt lake.
You are right, but you do not necessarily need a salt lake. Think about what I have just shown you with the Sabinas, with the salt works. Do you have salt works in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Madura Island? Yes. How comes that then there is no Artemia? Monsoon climate. Maybe in the dry season the conditions are good, but then a few months later it starts to rain, the salinity drops. You know that when the salinity drops, predators will come in, no chance for Artemia. So in the dry season, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, you name it, you have salt production, but it might only be 3 months, 4 months in the year, and the rest of the time, no chance for Artemia to survive. So our approach has been, in India, in many countries in Asia, seasonal introduction. So when the dry season comes, you wait until the salinity is high enough that the tilapia is out, that the predators are out. You introduce Artemia and you can set up a production. That's what I will show you and explain you. And you go first for the live reproduction, and then later you go for the cyst production. I will explain in a few minutes on how it is done. And then you see here the first harvests in Thailand of the cysts, the same what the farmers are doing. Very quickly, when you are harvesting the Artemia cysts, okay, you need to clean them, you need to process them. So initially, and I'm now talking the early 70s, we were talking about a few hundred kilograms, small quantities. So we could process it in shelves for drying. But very quickly we had to deal with bigger quantities, so we developed a technique, what is called fluidized bed drying. So in these funnel-shaped systems with air, you keep the cysts fluidized in the air and you dry them. Today it's big machines, as you can see here, either vertical dryers or horizontal dryers. When we are talking about 2,000 to 3,000 tons per year, you cannot do that anymore in a small system. And so the packaging, so many different brands. In the early 70s there was only American product. Today there is Chinese, Russian, Australian, Brazilian. You have different brands. And I think it might not be clear in the back, but I will tell you that in the 1970s, it was only a few hundred kilograms. When we started working on Artemia, the annual consumption was a few hundred kilograms. 10 years later, it was already many tons. And now, the latest figures, you see here 3,000 tons, the latest figures that we have, it must be between 3,500 and 4,000 tons per year. This is all due to the big expansion of hatcheries of shrimp, chrome, crab, different fish species as well. Very short, we don't have the time to go into much details. Hatching out Artemia, when you have a small quantity of cysts, you put them in a beaker in seawater. Next day you have plenty of Artemia nuclei. I tell you, it's a little bit different when you have to deal with 10 kilos, 100 kilos per day. The big hatcheries today are hatching out up to 100 kilos. So then you really need to take into consideration temperature, salinity, oxygen, pH. Okay, you can find this in the textbooks. And some of the companies, for example, here in Greece, they do this already in very, very high densities and intensive hatching systems. Skip this. Okay, important is once you have hatched out that you do good cleaning and harvesting of the Artemia. This is best done in filter systems. Again, there are handbooks. FAO has published a technical handbook on Artemia where you can find all these details. You might remember that I told you that when Artemia is born, when it is hatched out, that it is not eating, but this means that the first hours until it molts in the second stage, that it is using up a lot of its energy. So people in the early years in the hatcheries, they didn't care much. They hatch out the Artemia in the morning and they keep the nuclei all day in a bucket to feed every 2 or 3 hours. Not realizing that in that period of time, 20 to 30% of the value of the energy of the Artemia is metabolized. So today we see that the big hatcheries, they are using cooling systems. You cannot see, but this is with floating ice. Or even some in the more sophisticated hatcheries are using containers that are used for storing cold storage of milk. So some of the milk storage tanks are now used to store Artemia. I will skip this and move on to the different strains of Artemia, different techniques, because I want to come to the latest applications. So most of the applications that probably you learned about is feeding the nucleus Artemia, following the rotifers. This can be for sea bass, this is for grouper, for different species. But what we found out is a very successful application in Vietnam, and I hope soon also in Indonesia, is the umbrella Artemia. So remember what I explained to you? In an earlier stage of hatching, you have these umbrellas, and the success today in Vietnam with mud crab. Vietnam is the first country where they have real big-scale production of mud crablets in hatcheries. 200 million per year. Many, many institutes in Malaysia, in Thailand, maybe in Indonesia, claim, oh, we can produce mud crab in hatchery. But the big handicap is that when they have to do it at big industrial scale, they have a lot of mortality, and a lot of the mortality is due to the fact that they have to grow big quantities of rotifers. Rotifers are a good food, but rotifers bring in also a lot of vibrio. That's where the problem is. While using umbrella Artemia, you can skip the rotifers. And this is the key of the success in Vietnam in doing now industrial production of mud crab larvae. Okay, so we talk a lot about the cysts, but there is also the biomass. And I must say that it has taken me a long time to convince farmers not just to focus only on the cysts, but also to consider the biomass. This is very high nutritional value. But people can make more money with the cysts, and it is only in the last 5 years, I can say, that we see finally a real interest, and as you will see in the following pictures, to use biomass. Biomass has a long history in the ornamental fish industry, the pet market, already since the 1960s, as you see here. And why is the biomass to be considered as a good source of food? Provided, of course, that size is not a problem, protein content, some of the essential amino acids, fatty acid profile, so it is one of the better food products. It is, the biggest application of it is in China. China, it is thousands of tons every summer that are harvested, and you see they are loading it on in buckets on trucks, and then bring it to the shrimp ponds, to the fish ponds, and feed directly the live Artemia biomass to the aquaculture organisms. Many other techniques, this is in China, the next slides you will see is in Thailand, where they are freezing and selling the frozen biomass. This is a few pictures here from the Artemia biomass production in Thailand. It's really a big business. We are talking about a business of close to $1 million a year just in Thailand, and mainly used, you see, 75% for use in local fish and shrimp hatcheries. The day that you can produce Artemia in Madura Island, you produce cysts, but you can also take advantage of the Artemia biomass. The way, this is some pictures of the Artemia farms in Thailand, where they are harvesting with a very simple fishing boat, as you can see here. They are storing in a very high density the Artemia biomass, and then cleaning it. So they have very simple methods to get it clean from Vibrio and from other possible pathogens, and then sell it to the farmers. Very clean, high quality biomass. Freezing it, so they sell it alive, and what is not sold alive, they can freeze it and store it as you see here. Okay, I'm coming to the second last part, and that will be the example of Vietnam. And really, I hope that some of you will get some inspiration from what you will see in the next slides. I tell you the story of Vietnam. This has taken maybe 20 years to reach the situation of today, a very constructive one, but where you, in learning from the mistakes that have been made, could be much faster in setting up the same in Madura Island. So we are talking about the very south, the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, where you have more than 1,000 small, I tell you, poor salt farmers that operate on a seasonal basis, so only in the dry season. And in Vietnam, the dry season starts in December and is over about this time of the year, end of April. So it's, I say 5 months, but the real Artemia period is only 4 months, because you need to wait 1 month to have the good salinity. When we started working there, I tell you, this was very poor. No electricity, really subsistence, survival. People were doing some extensive shrimp culture, no hatcheries, it was just collecting wild shrimp larvae in the rainy season, and in the dry season producing salt. I show you these pictures of the farmer houses because now, at the end, I will show you the houses today with bricks, with colors, So people have reached a standard where it is no longer subsistence survival. So in the 1980s, I was sent by FAO first time in 1982 to Vietnam to see that country that at that time was very isolated from the world. I got the criticism when I came back in Belgium, oh, you were helping a communist country, we finance your work at university, not to give it away to the communists. So you see, there were a lot of politics involved. But anyhow, I think we have been able to see between 1985, and this is the period here, 2012, from, let's say, a very difficult period where trial and error, success and failure, eventually we came to a real good development, good profitability for the farmers. So it is in the southeast. What changes did we have to make? This is the layout of the salt ponds. I don't remember, I visited, but I don't remember the layout in Madura Island. But in that region in Vietnam, they talk about salt streets. Salt streets, so each farmer has maybe 4 or 5 ponds, not more. They take in the water here from the sea, the canal, that at high tide water can be, because they have no electricity, water comes in, goes through the evaporation ponds and comes finally in the crystallizers. So you will remember what I told you, no need to try to grow Artemia in 40, in 50, in 60 parts per thousand, because there will be tilapia, there will be other predators. So you wait until you reach the proper salinity. But when you reach the proper salinity, you are confronted with a new problem, temperature. I'm sure you go today to Madura Island, you measure at 2 o'clock in the afternoon the temperature in the salt ponds, and it's maybe 40, 42 degrees centigrade, too hot for Artemia. So what we have done, and you will see that this is now practiced, those ponds, not all, those ponds that have the good salinity for Artemia, this was in the past all done by hand. Now they are using already better equipment. You make a ditch, so this is the ponds that we want to modify. We make a perimeter ditch, use this soil to increase the dike, and in fact with a minimal effort you modify a salt pond, continues to be a salt pond, but can also be integrated now for Artemia culture. And you see this is the second evaporation ponds in the salt street that is modified. Simple pond construction. It means each year after the rainy season they have to do the remodeling of the ponds because of the rain. Some of the dikes have eroded, so they have to do again. Have to stop the ponds at the moment that you are sure that there is no crab, no tilapia, so that the salinity is high enough. And then the next problem is food. You need to assure that you have sufficient food in the ponds, and this is where you can control the algae production using urea, using the different organic or inorganic fertilizers. So again, in a manual, we don't have the time to go in detail, but I can give you the links where you can download a manual on pond production, manual on hatchery use. Now we are ready to do the inoculation. So the inoculation means that we will select a proper strain. We will inoculate at the instar 1 stage, and you see some of the instructions for densities. So people, and now this is in the field, this is not in a hatchery, this is not in the laboratory. You set up some simple methods with buckets and some light, and eventually it is with car batteries that you are running a pump an air pump to aerate. So then the next morning you can collect the Artemia, put it in bags, and either with the boat or with the motorcycle, they go to the Artemia ponds and do the inoculation. This is a very traditional protocol now. There are more than 500 families in Vietnam that are practicing this technique. Most of the time we advise to do the inoculation in the evening, because that means the temperature will further drop, and only the next morning, so maybe 10 hours later, the temperature will go up and that the Artemia have had already some time to acclimate. Pond management is very simple, maybe a refractometer or a densitometer to check the salinity. And then very crucial is to do the daily pumping, or every other day the pumping from your algae pond into the Artemia pond. In Vietnam, in Thailand, they are now working also on techniques to use chicken manure, rice bran, byproduct of the monosodium glutamate production. So there are alternatives also that are being used. Very important is that at least 2 times per day that you harvest the cysts. And this is a very different story as what you have seen with the trains over the Great Salt Lake. It means that, for example, this farmer, in the morning he will collect half a kilo, in the evening he will collect 400 grams of product, but you do that in an area where you have 500 families and you collect a lot of product. You need to prevent, this was our big concern in the beginning, the Artemia cysts, they float, by wind they are thrown ashore, but many times, might be the case in Madura Island, in the afternoon hours you have stronger and stronger winds, and when there are too strong winds you get foam, and when there is foam the Artemia cysts are trapped in the foam and your Artemia cysts get airborne and lost. So we were looking, and it is simple solutions, good to work with people here together in Southeast Asia, but very simple method to break the waves, to ensure that you have no foam production, as you can see here, floating bamboo. Just 1 or 2 lines of floating bamboo, you will temper the waves, and you will prevent the formation of foam. Here it is banana leaves that they are using, and you see there the accumulation of the Artemia cysts. So every morning, every afternoon, the farmer goes, is collecting the cysts. He is using a double net, a net that will retain floating feathers, floating wood, pieces of wood, etc. And then what comes through are the cysts that are stored in brine. Again, great opportunity with Artemia. The farmer is collecting the cysts, and you would expect, oh, he needs to process the cysts every day. No. He put them in brine, and that means that you have to add a lot of salt, saturated brine. You can keep the cysts for 1 month, for 2 months, for 3 months, no problem. So that means that each individual farmer, they have at home, because this is very precious material, they really sleep on it. So you see that at home they have a bucket or a tank where they are storing the product. And then once a week or every other week, a motorcycle or a small truck is going from farm to farm, buy 5 kilos, 10 kilos, and brings it to a local processing plant. So at this moment, I was telling you about 500 families. Today there are 3 cooperatives in the region there that are doing the processing. Again, no time to go in details, but the washing, using a centrifuge to remove the water, use the dryers, and then here the final packaging. Very standard method, very good quality products. And they managed to have up to 250 kilograms of cysts per hectare per season. And in Vietnam, the season is only 4 months. So the 3 cooperatives you see there, this is a figure of 2 years ago. Last year they were already at 50 tons of cysts per year, per dry season. But then with a big expansion, Vietnam is a big producer in aquaculture that meets only 10% of the local production. So there is still a lot of room for expansion. And you have also some figures here on the socioeconomics, the life conditions, the living standards of the farmers have improved a lot. So remember the picture that I showed you with the huts and the very, very poor people. Today there is electricity, people have stone houses, the living conditions have really improved a lot. They are also very active in extension work because it's not enough to demonstrate a technique, you have to make sure that also the other farmers can learn. So this is all suggestions and ideas that you could consider the day that you set up something in Madura Island. Okay, I will finish. Give me 5 more minutes and I'm through. And I'd like to finish with what you see here at the bottom, but which is not coming completely on the screen. The role of universities, polytechnic in society. And I call this societal leverage as one of the priorities that were identified at the big global conference on aquaculture. And I'm using, and I hope you don't mind that I'm using a little bit Europe and our experience in Europe to show you that there are opportunities to be effective at the level of society. And please also realize it's not because I'm showing the example here of Europe to say that Europe is the best. I can tell you it has taken us many, many years to get to this European aquaculture technology and innovation platform. Many years. The farmers didn't want to deal with universities. Universities, you are in ivory towers, you don't know what the reality is of the field. The farmers in the north of Europe and the farmers in the south of Europe. You might know the Mediterranean, Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, and then in the north, the Norwegians. Very different level of technology in aquaculture. Bringing these people around the table, I remember when I was inviting them to try to set up this organization, they said, hey, Patrick, we don't sit at the same table with these farmers from Greece and from Spain. They don't know what they are doing. When I was inviting the people from Greece and Spain and Italy, they said, Patrick, we don't like to come to that table because the Norwegians, they will dominate us. Just to tell you, it's not easy, but if you take the time, and it took us several years, we have now, and I'm very proud of this organization, where we have all the stakeholders, government, private, we can cluster them here as you see. The producers, this is the farmers, the trout farmers, the salmon farmers, the mussel farmers, the feed companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the hardware companies, scientific organizations, international consumer and policy makers. All the stakeholders. I'm zooming in, it's not coming at the right place. I want to zoom in on the scientific organizations because all together we have developed a vision for Europe. I would say 10 years ago, when a vision for Europe had to be worked out, they asked the universities, we were writing up a vision, and then the farmer said, you academics, what do you know about the vision for the future? They were not doing the job. We were doing the job, but then we were criticized because we didn't act enough in interaction. We have now set up a joint vision because this organization has a board, and the board is 11 CEOs of aquaculture companies. No academic in the board of this organization. But then the different groups, the different stakeholders are consulted to develop the vision, to think about training, etc. So one of the working groups in this organization is called the International Cooperation. I am very happy. I was invited by these CEOs to be the chairman of this International Cooperation Working Group. And I will not talk about all the activities, I will talk about the activities where Asia is involved. And you see that here in August 2014 in Jakarta, you might recognize some of the people here, we had a consultation meeting between Europe and Asian countries. Indonesia was present, Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, maybe others that are Malaysia that I forgot. And the idea was to look what are now common interests between the two regions in the world. And the one that you are interested in is to see, that identifying R&D priorities, innovation priorities, capacity building. This came from the business people. Business people who realized we need more training, and training not only at the academic level, also at the vocational level, close to the farming sector. In the past, I have to admit, certainly in Europe, I will not comment about Indonesia or other Asian countries. In Europe, we have focused too much on the academic training, master and PhD. Very important, but that's not the only one. You should also have the vocational training. So, okay, these were the different priorities. What is now happening in the field? What is now the current situation? We had in Europe Aquatinet, some of you might have heard about. This was a thematic network where more than 100 universities and polytechnic institutions in Europe that are offering, not necessarily a full program in aquaculture, but that are offering courses in aquaculture, came together, discussed about credit exchange, discussed about student placement in farms, very important. The polytechnics and universities need to interact with the private sector. Initially, it might be the case here in Indonesia as well, that the farmers say, we don't want students because they will see what we are doing, they will copy. Today, we have a very good cooperation. The farmers are in fact standing in line, please, please let the student come. We want to be the first to test your new idea on this topic or on that topic. Once you develop a good relationship, once you develop a good credibility, it's good for the students, it's good for the education centers, and it's good for the private sector. So initially, until 2 years ago, we had the ASEM aquaculture platform, and now through the ETIP, the platform I was just mentioning, the European Commission in September or October, I will discuss it with the Dean after the lecture, the EU will finance a cooperation between Europe and the Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia, because the cooperation will be, and I think I'm happy that I'm telling this here in Airlangga University, because as you can see here, one of the founding partners in the ASEAN Fisheries Education Network is your university. And you have, I'm really proud that here in Southeast Asia that you have taken that initiative. Bottom up, not top down, bottom up, and that now we have been able to convince the European Commission that this is the organization to link with in a new 3-year program that hopefully in September will start. 2 or 3 slides to finish. It's a little bit my buzzwords, talking about universities, talking about educational centers. We have 3 responsibilities. A responsibility in education, a responsibility in research, and please, today, when we talk about good education in aquaculture, be it at the academic level, be it at the vocational level, it needs to be research-driven. It's no longer the case, as it was, say, 10 and 20 and 30 years ago, that you have a university and that you have a research institute, and that these are 2 worlds apart. No. It has taken lots of efforts, also in Europe, because France, Britain, Germany, they have very good universities and they have very good research institutes, but real separate from each other. Today, the teachers at the universities and the polytechnics are supervising researchers in the research institute and vice versa. This is what we need to do together. And then outreach, you can also call it service to society. This is where, that was certainly the case in Europe, I don't know about here, that we were sometimes focusing all the time on this and didn't think much about the reality in the field, the interaction with the public and private sector. That slide is completely, I will skip it. And then those of you who know me, I'm a strong advocate of networking. My whole life I have tried to bring students here and there. And so what I hope and what I see happening is that we have north-south and east and west. So this is where your ASEAN FEN hopefully now can be linked up with Aquatinet in Europe. Maybe one day can also be linked up with networks in Latin America, because Latin America could learn from you and you could also get some ideas from there. And I will quickly go through the next points. So this is, you can find on the website on our laboratory. On another thing that I like to emphasize, interdisciplinary cooperation. Very, very important. My whole life I have tried to bring, so this is our faculty. These are the people who have taken over from me. I retired in 2013. But we have a very strong consortium with the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, the Faculty of Sciences, and this is the way you can be strong. In aquaculture, you cannot be a specialist in bacteriology and in virology and in nutrition. You need to see how either within your university you will work with your Faculty of Veterinary Sciences, or with the Polytechnic in Surabaya, or with another university in Indonesia that is a little bit more focused on this subject. Don't try to be the best in everything. This is not easy. So we have an MSc. Many Indonesians, I think it must be between 20 and 30, have graduated in Ghent in the MSc in aquaculture. And you will see the pictures coming. We have trained a lot of students from, you see the countries to the left. Indonesia will also appear there. So a lot of the PhDs that have graduated in Ghent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for giving this presentation. So the next session, I will invite you to ask